A bit of action that cut short the final session of play. It was anyway nearing stumps, but that drop catch pretty much sums up Australia's day. A fine session of batting by India in which they didn't lose a single wicket. Sums up a fine day's play for India in which they're now 82 ahead in the second test match at the MCG. On ESPN Cricket for Matchday, we look back at what's been a memorable day for Ajinkya Rahane, who becomes the first man to get 100 this series and manages a 12th test stun, perhaps as memorable as any that he's ever scored. Tom Moody and Akash Chopra with me. Akash, that is India's day quite clearly.
Oh, 100%. And let's be fair, Tom and I were there when India got a 53-run first innings lead in Adelaide. And we thought that India was ahead at that time. But now you can actually, and we found out that they weren't. But now you can actually say that even though India has to bat last, but then this lead is not just 82. The fact is you still have wickets in the shed. And there is a batsman who's well set on 100. Ravindra Jadeja is looking fairly good. And now the Australian batting lineup also has been exposed quite a bit in this series already. So from all perspectives, from all vantage points, this is not just India's day. India is now considerably, significantly ahead in this game.
What an important session of play, Tom, wasn't it? They dismissed both overnight batsmen in the first session, did Australia. They picked up 2 wickets, including one of Pant just before tea. You think India the match was still in the balance with the lead still not secure. Then comes a session of play without a single wicket, which could potentially expose the tail. And India suddenly 82 ahead. That was a massive session, wasn't it, the last one?
An enormous session, because what you're doing is you're basically... you're building on the hard work during the day. And if I'm looking at from an Australian perspective, I'm nothing but disappointed with just the approach that Australia seemed to have in that last session. It lacked energy. It lacked positive body language. It seems like they were sitting back in the game waiting for something to happen instead of being upfront and trying to make things happen. And when things did sort of come their way, whether they be difficult chances, whether they be half chances, they didn't even look like taking them. So I think Australia, that's a day, or let's put it this way, it's 2 days they'd rather forget.
Right. Now, we will discuss Australia's lapses in the field, of which there were no fewer than 4 today. And I had one of Shubman Gill's yesterday of Manas Labuschagne. And it's perhaps a mirror image of the story of Adelaide between India and Australia and their fielding in Melbourne. But let's start with the story of the day, which is surely Ajinkya Rahane. Akash, is this the best you've seen him bat?
It is as good as we have seen him bat. Let's be fair. He scored a century at Lord's. That was a greenish surface, and the majority of that innings came batting alongside Bhuvneshwar Kumar on a day one pitch, where everybody else faltered. So that was a top class innings. Recency is always slightly biased, so that's the thing I won't go. But it is as good as we have seen him bat. These were tough conditions. He was asked to lead. There is no Virat Kohli. India got dismissed for 36 in the previous test innings at Adelaide. And here comes a guy and looked completely in control. That was the best part. We will see those highlights quite often where he's driving the ball beautifully. He's cutting the ball to get to his century or pulling the ball to the short balls that were bowled to him. I thought the highlight was the way he left the ball outside off. Absolutely no problem. That tells you that he knows, one, where his off stump is, two, that he's very calm and collected, that he's willing to bide his time. He's not going after the ball because he's fidgety or anxious. And then the forward defense, I thought that was the hallmark, because if there is certain amount of lateral movement of the surface and you see somebody defending the way he did because the balls were within the stumps and then leaving everything that's slightly outside of, you don't know how to actually dismiss the batsman. And this is where he was exceptional. He batted in Ranchi also with the same kind of attitude against spin, and the same Ranchi attitude actually came to the fore against Nathan Lyon today, where he was happy to just step down the track, and he was picking the length quite early, something that he's been guilty of not doing as clearly against the spinners. But it was barring that one drop catch, or maybe two now in the end. It was a near flawless innings, and one of the best by an Indian captain away from home.
Yeah, I mean, both those drop chances came after the second new balls. You think fairly deep into Rahane's innings. But going to the word Akash used, Tom, control. Does that stand out? In spite of those few chances, there was a nick that went between keeper and slip, which I guess happens for everyone. Does that strike you as a very controlled innings and, given the circumstances, an impactful one?
Yeah, look, for me, when he came in, obviously the score was only on 61, I think it was. Then soon after his arrival, another wicket fell. So with India at 3 for 63, I think it was, with all the pressure that was the build-up for this Test match, with the absence of Virat Kohli, one of the best players in the world, and also the captain of this side after a disastrous performance in Adelaide, you can't imagine the pressure that he was under. But to me, did it look like it? It certainly didn't look like it. He looked composed, he looked in control, and he showed what leadership's about. Leadership's about actions, and his actions was very much one of head down, I'm grinding this out, I'm going to show you discipline, I'm going to show you some maturity, some class along the way, and allow my innings to unfold and blossom for you all to enjoy. And to me, the way he acknowledged his 100 was the most special part of that innings. So understated. A similar player across the Tasman, Kane Williamson, acknowledged 100 against Pakistan in a very similar, modest fashion. And I just love watching players like this that are understated. Everyone knows that they've just climbed Everest, but they're just quite comfortable just nodding their head and raising their bat.
Yeah, it's a different school of captaincy. Now, we know what Virat Kohli brings to the table, and that has its own merits. Here is perhaps a completely contrasting personality, Akash, but it does seem like captaincy rests very well on Ajinkya Rahane's shoulders from the moment he took the field. In fact, even before the game, with his selection calls, bringing Ashwin on, now with the bat, it did seem like Ajinkya Rahane that relishes the leadership role.
Hindsight is perfect vision. When India made so many changes, there were a few eyebrows raised because playing two spinners, for example, going in with a batsman shot when you don't have Virat Kohli. These things, if they do backfire, then things look very different. If India had dropped the number of catches that India dropped in Adelaide or Australia dropped at Melbourne, you'll find that we would be singing a slightly different tone and telling a different story altogether. So I'd say that as a batsman, captaincy has nothing to do with it personally. You go out as a batsman and a batsman alone. Of course, you know that you're the captain and you have to do a certain thing a certain way. But that's what you do. You do what's best for the best that you can provide and produce. So as a batsman, you are just a batsman. Captains or a captainship, that role just happens to be your role as a skipper of the side. But his captaincy on the field was, of course, very instinctive. It was aggressive. He put the right kind of fields. Of course, he played 5 bowlers, which now looks fantastic. Even though you didn't need Jadeja as much in the first innings, he might be handful in the second, and he scored the runs. So when things fall in place, it looks all rosy and wonderful. But limited the sample size, Ajinkya Rahane has looked the part. Let's say that whenever he's captaincy, or rather whenever he's been the captain, he's not looked out of place.
Yeah, I can trust Akash to keep me in check if I get carried away in my bubble and think everything's going so well. Akash puts it in perspective for me. But I find that a very interesting observation, what Akash said, Tom, because I tend to hear a lot of commentary and a lot of analysis that says, oh yes, captaincy affects certain players. You've seen David Warner at the Sunrisers carefully. Is it just incidental that you happen to be captain, but as batsman, that's in isolation? There's something about Rahane, the batsman in this test, that just seems different from Rahane, the batsman in the last test. Correct me if I'm wrong.
You could possibly put it down to the extra responsibility of leadership, and it's given him an increased focus. That's if he needed it. But I think Rahane has been around a long enough time for us to understand and appreciate that he's got these qualities. And at times we can, I suppose, command those qualities to shine on a more irregular basis than what is humanly possible. Rahane's got a terrific record overseas. He's played well in Australia before. He's played well at this venue before. So maybe the increased responsibility, the fact that he had to bring his team off the canvas after the first Test match in Adelaide has been the added motivation. But more, I don't think it's motivation, but just focus to making sure that he personally gets it right and shows those great leadership qualities that lie within him, even though it's in a very modest way. But they certainly stand out when he steps up to the plate.
All right. Now, job still not done for Ajinkya Rahane, but it's been an excellent day in the office for him. It's been two very good days in the office for him. This one personally is batsman. As we focus on the rest of the cast, the supporting cast, as it turns out, cameo from or runs from Shubman Gill, cameos from Rishabh Pant. Now, what's looking like more than a cameo from Ravindra Jadeja. Akash, just thoughts on the collective batting effort today. It seems a curious day where batsmen who get in then get out, with Rahane being the exception.
It is very interesting, actually, when we look at a test match score. Mostly these 20s, 30s, they go unnoticed because they don't really dent or they don't really have the same kind of impact, say maybe a 70 or an 80 would have. And 9 out of 10 times, we actually blame people who get a start and then squander that advantage. And to be fair, we should still be critical for a simple reason that once you've gotten that start, you've already done the hard yards. The way that you've been dismissed, whether it's Hanuma Vihari or Rishabh Pant, of course, both played a part, an important part in the context of the game, because you're not really looking at Australia's 425. It's only 195. And then when you put that in perspective, 29s and 32s are great scores, or rather at least acceptable scores. But they got dismissed to balls that were not wicket-taking deliveries. And they will have to be harsh on themselves that, we are allowing the opposition to come back into the game where we had the advantage, or we were in a position to now seize control. If you continue to just let the slip go out of your hands so often, once in a while it will come back to bite you. So that's the lesson from there. But then, of course, the value of for these 20s, 30s, 40s in a low scoring kind of test match can never be overstated.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the partnership charts, I guess that tells the story, Tom. The partnership of 61 between Pujara and Gill after a wicket, partnership of 52 between Rahane and Vihari after both overnight batsmen, 57 between Rahane and Pant, in particular, that one that came at pretty decent pace, and now partnership over 100. So is it just in the context of this game that these 20-30s are not bad scores? And what do you put it down to? Is it just great bowling, two good bowling lineups, and some ordinary batting, or should we be a little more lenient towards batsmen?
Oh, look, to me, any form of cricket, it's a batsmanship is about partnerships. And Rahane was the glue, he was the anchor, and other people managed to, make significant contributions for the team. From a personal point of view, they'll look back at their own individual performance and they'll be very disappointed the fact they got in, because the hardest thing to do in any cricket match, in any format, is to get in. And once you get in, it's when you really need to, make the opposition pay. So they'll be as frustrated as anyone. But the most important thing about their contribution is that there was time attached to it, but there was a consistent partner at the other end, which made the team score progress in a very positive fashion. So, yes, you can be critical, but I wouldn't be over critical. If anything, draw some positives from it. And that is the fact that we got some significant partnerships, which has put us in the position where we're leading by 82 with wickets in hand. The one innings that I'd like to highlight is Pant's innings. I just felt the impetus that he bring to the crease with his initial spark and the way he got off to a positive start, I think that really set up that last session. And it gave the Indians the confidence that, right, we've got the Aussies we've got them on the ground here, and we can really push hard in this final session and take full advantage. And it's exactly what they did. And I thought a lot of that was to do with Pant and the way he went about it and played his natural game.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the timing of that innings as well, Akash. When he came in, India were 116 for 4. They were still, 80 odd behind Australia. All of a sudden, quick fire 50 partnership, and the lead is within sight. I've heard that on the on-air comms as well. Tom mentions the point that little cameo of 29 or 40 from Pant was significant in just changing the mood or the context of the innings.
See, it changed the way Australians were actually attacking till that point as well, because till Pant wasn't there, the attempt was to actually like very close fielding positions, and you're trying to dismiss the batsman with every ball that you're bowling, all attacking lines, both with in terms of lines and lengths, and also the fielding positions. But here comes a guy, one who's a southpaw, so obviously you need to now change your lines quite radically, and then he comes aggressive. He just comes trying to play shots wherever there was a possibility, and suddenly Australia now had to decide how aggressive can they be. under the circumstances, knowing fully well that it's only 195 and not 295. There's only 80 runs for India to now start building a lead. And the second new ball is not that far away. So when you put all those things in perspective, then they did go for on the defensive a little bit, and Pant did run away with it while it lasted. It's just that, see, my reservation only is that these smaller totals, individual scores, 20s, 30s, 40s, they're fine. They're all right. So I'm not trying to take anything away from it. The only issue when it crops up or these smaller partnerships or these smaller individual scores, they lead to at times one wicket falling and then two or three falling in a heap. And then there is you've not really built enough, and that's when you end up being overcritical. Currently, from a very individual point of view, when you look at Hanuma Vihari, just think about his place in the side. And with Rohit Sharma coming in, then there is a KL Rahul sitting outside. So you know that what you've just done. Yes, you've played a little part, an important part, albeit, but you've not done enough for yourself, and you've let yourself down. So that's just the other side of the story. But Rishabh Pant, of course, has gotten a start. He's looked all right. He would have loved to actually carry on, because then the game also moves a lot faster.
All right. Just before we get into a detailed assessment of Australia's bowling, perhaps the one player that's shown to go on with that sort of start has been Ravindra Jadeja. Quick word on the impact of his innings. I'll start with you, Akash, because you made the point yesterday. These numbers that have that we look at Ravindra Jadeja as the improved batsman, often a number 6 or 7, bats in a different context of the game where he probably goes for it and therefore gets these big innings. This is the other kind of innings where you have to build a partnership to change the where the game stands. So this is perhaps one of the better Jadeja innings you've seen.
This is perhaps the best Jadeja innings that you would see outside of the subcontinent. The subcontinental innings have a different kind of flair to it, far less risky in terms of the shot making, the kind of bowling that you're facing, what is to offer off the surface as well. But this was critical because Rishabh Pant had just gotten out. Second new ball was not that far away. There is Ajinkya Rahane at the other end, and now deal with 3 quality fast bowlers and an off spinner to boot on a slightly challenging pitch. It's not flat, it's not unplayable, but it is challenging still. And he was brilliant. His was a chanceless innings. He was willing to run very hard between the stumps. Was looking to rotate the strike as and when possible. And more importantly, a lot of confidence and self-belief, because when you see a lower order batsman, he's now graduating himself into a proper all-rounder at test match level outside the subcontinent. But when you look at the lower order batsmen, when there is baptism with fire, when there is a lot of short pitch stuff or fast stuff coming your way, you end up playing your hands too much. You don't really leave outside off. You go at everything and see whether it comes off. If it comes off, it's great. If it doesn't, you don't really back yourself to be there and grinding it out. But Jadeja was willing to do that today, and that's the difference I see in his batting off late, where he started trusting his own abilities a lot more. And of course, this was one innings that will fall into that bracket. Those 40 runs are gold dust.
Yeah, is this a defining chapter in the story of Jadeja, the improved batsman, Tom, after impactful innings during the IPL, a significant innings in the white ball series, and a man who's making a strong claim to bat perhaps higher in all formats? Here you come effectively in place of Virat Kohli. The combination of Jadeja and Pant was looked at as batting cover. And given that the batting that follows with Ashwin's batting sort of on the way in, and 9-10 Jack, not as good as you'd find otherwise, this has been a terrific innings, hasn't it?
Been a very, very good innings, there's no question. And the most impressive thing for me throughout that whole innings was his robust defence. And to me, that is an area that if I was looking at Jadeja with in the rear vision mirror, and what he's done previously is just the vulnerability from a defensive point of view. But to me, he showed great composure in defence. He also showed that he had the ability to play the long game, in the sense that he was prepared to be patient and let the ball go well. And it was an enormous amount of maturity. So does he fit into the side with Pant and him at 6 and 7? Whoever bats 6 and 7 certainly does. That's a good enough top 7 for me in Test cricket if he's playing with that type of maturity.
All right, and still not done. So these two will resume things tomorrow. But let's look back at what sort of day it was for Australia with the ball on a day where Josh Hazlewood's gone wicketless after the kind of impact he had in the second innings in Adelaide, and a day when Nathan Lyons just picked up the one wicket when you could effectively say Ashwin's out-bowled Lyon, which is not often in Australia. Tom, your review of how Australia bowled today?
Yeah, look, unfortunately, bowlers need fielders to take catches. And bowlers and a bowling unit can look pretty ordinary when those chances are missed. And I'm first to point the finger at the field before I'm pointing the finger at the bowlers. The bowlers created opportunities for his support crew, as in his fielders, to take those chances. And we saw what happened with India. A similar thing happened with them, where their bowlers were terribly let down by their fielders. The same things happened with Australia. So it's very hard to really be overcritical of the bowlers, because you just don't know what their day could have looked like if those chances were taken. Unusual for Australia to be as sloppy in the field. I just can't help but feel, looking at the first 2 days, I can't help but feel Australia have come to Melbourne with not a conscious mindset, but a subconscious mindset. Their best batsman's gone home. We've just humiliated them in the first test. This will be a walk in the park. This is our game. We just need to turn up and play a test match without any real attention to detail and thought and conviction. And it's backfired massively. And it reflected in the way they batted. Some of the shot selection and the recklessness that we saw on the first day, and it's reflected in the field with the way they have fielded. The bowlers, I thought, bowled okay. Let's face it, in that first hour, Australia could have had 3 wickets. There was a number of player misses. They bowled beautiful lines, particularly Pat Cummins, but the edges weren't there. I think they showed vision of very similar bowling in Adelaide, where the Indian batsmen edged every single one of them. So that's the difference between, it's millimetres that this game can offer. And when you do get your chance, that's why it's so important to take it.
Yeah, as many as 4 went down today. Strong words from Tom Akash, but if you look back at the 2 days of play, could you see that? A bit of recklessness, a bit of complacency, if anything, in Australia?
See, you can put it down to, yes, what Tom is saying. There is definite merit in actually assuming that that could perhaps be the mindset, because everything was hinting in the direction of Australia now dominating from here, actually steamrolling the opposition, because it's not just Kohli who's gone, there is Shami who's disappeared as well. So it's half the bowling attack. They'll have to make, of course, India had to make a lot of changes to make do with people who've already gone. So, and then 2 main pillars of the Indian Test lineup. But what I also felt with the Australian batting, and this is now twice in a row, I'm just discounting that little innings in the Adelaide second innings, but the first innings, now the second innings, there's lack of quality. There's lack of quality in a few batsmen for sure, which is coming to the fore. Now that lack of quality could be because of lack of form or lack of confidence, but you do feel that they're searching for answers, and that's what was visible yesterday. And today, when you talk about, I think the one very significant difference was how India played Nathan Lyon. Because Nathan Lyon was someone who was the tormentor in chief in the first test match. Suddenly you were prepared for the faster bowlers, and here was Nathan Lyon who dismissed Cheteshwar Pujara and then kept a tight leash and all of that. But here India played him well, played him better. Very happy to use their feet, going deep inside the crease. Hanuma Vihari was, of course, in the end got dismissed, playing 1 shot too many, but he was also playing him really well with the sweeps and then stepping out. So once you neutralize a threat that's going to be present for about 20-25 overs in a day, and a threat as good as Nathan Lyon, then suddenly other things start looking a little smoother, and the runs are also starting to flow. Which wasn't the case in Adelaide, because you couldn't score against Nathan Lyon. Of course, fast bowlers were not going to give you anything with a pink ball on that surface. So India were not moving. Even when they were not getting dismissed, there was no progress whatsoever. Here, things were different, because Nathan Lyon, I thought India played him a lot better.
All right, fair enough. Now, 82 ahead. Next time we pick up this chat is going to be at least after a session of play on ESPN Cricket for Match Day. So let's check in with Tom Moody and Akash Chopra. We know what can happen with India and their batting, and we also know that 4th innings chases are tough, Tom. At what stage do you get the impression that Australia could be outbatted of this game?
Oh wow, that's. I would hope Australia would hope that they managed to dismiss India well before lunch of the third day. So that's not batting any more than 2 hours. If they manage to bat beyond lunch, that lead is going to be at a point where Australia are going to find it very, very difficult, and mainly for the reason that Akash has mentioned, and that is the lack of form, the lack of experience and quality in that Australian lineup. And they certainly haven't shown to this point or given you any sort of confidence that they're a side that can chase, 300 set a total of 350, 380 after being underwater or in a deficit of 160.
All right. And as it turns out, Akash, it's possible. If they nick one or two early tomorrow, then you can have India all out very quickly. That lead of 82 stays somewhere below 100. Important for India's point of view to try and extend this to 120, 130, given what fourth innings chases could be like.
See, under 100 will be a little ambitious, is what I feel, after how things have gone. But yes, if Australia will be happy, see, the thing is, what has already happened. You can't really change it. So 82 are still on the board. You still have 5 wickets in hand. So you know that no matter how quickly you dismiss, there will be about 50, 70 runs that will be scored. And if you go that far, from an India perspective, I think if India is got a cushion of anything over 130, 140, they'll be sitting pretty. I know for sure that India has to bat last, and it is difficult. Test matches, fourth innings. India's record is quite ordinary as well in a run chase. But I'm fairly confident and bullish. If India gets 150 plus in the first innings, I think that will be game India.
All right. Thank you very much, Akash Chopra and Tom Moody. Quite convincingly, India's day, especially after that final session of play between Ajinkya Rahane and Ravindra Jadeja. A day to remember for Rahane in a Boxing Day Test match, perhaps the highest spectacle in Test cricket around the world, and captaining India given the circumstances, a 12th and a very memorable Test 100, and the job is still not done. Do catch us for analysis at tea time tomorrow on ESPN Cricinfo Match Day. And of course, if you're watching in the subcontinent or in India, you can catch clips and highlights and all the action, including what looks like now a compilation of Australia's missed chances that should be ready on the site on espncricinfo.com as well as the mobile app. Advantage India after day 2.